Many NASCAR drivers and team owners speak out on NASCAR's next-gen safety issues and could Chandler possibly be headed to Kaulig racing. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories to discuss here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just understand those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start with talking about the Xfinity Series race from Talladega Super Speedway. Now, Joseph Strigley does this really cool Strigley stats after every race, or if there's something really cool that happens after every race, he will talk about it. And he noted that every single car finished the NASCAR Xfinity Series race that started the race at Talladega Super Speedway. That is the first time ever in any Super Speedway race in all 393 races that have taken place on Super Speedways for the top 3 series. This is the first time that has ever happened. That is incredible to me, the fact that every single car finished the NASCAR Xfinity Series race. It was a relatively clean race. There was only one crash, basically, for a single car spin for Ty Gibbs, but I think he still had a really good finish at the end of the day. But it's kind of nuts to see that every car finished that race. I think that's incredible and good to see that everyone's able to finish. Kind of a crazy stat, though, that everyone was able to finish the race. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Richard Childress Racing. As it was announced yesterday that Richard Childress announced pit crew extensions for multiple pit crew members on the Austin Dillon car. Paul Swan, Ethan Tingler, Josh Thomas, and Nick Colby are going to remain at RCR in the 3 team through the 2028 season. It's kind of cool to see that we've seen some multiple organizations and teams announcing extra pit crew members and extensions for pit crew members. It's not just the drivers, it's the pit crew members who also work on these cars and the road crews who also deserve extensions as well if they put in a great performance. Excited to see all these people coming back, and good to see Rich Childress Racing continue to work with those people. It's really good to see for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Daytona International Speedway. Now, President of Daytona International Speedway, Chip Wild, reported that there was no structural damage to Daytona International Speedway, but they're still assessing the buildings when it comes to the hurricane. Of course, this past week, Hurricane Ian came through the country, came through Florida, and basically destroyed a lot of cities, including Fort Myers, which basically got a ton of damage from the hurricane. But Daytona did have a lot of flooding from some photos that did come out. The Daytona did have a lot of flooding, but luckily there was no structural damage to the track. That's a really good thing to hear, at least that track did not end up getting really any big damage. It's good to see, at least on that part. My prayers and condolences still go out to Florida, who has been affected by the hurricane, and anyone else who has been affected by the hurricane as well. My prayers do go out to you as well. It sucks what happened, but it's good to see there really wasn't any major structural damage from that. It was really good to see for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Singapore Grand Prix. Now, while we did have the NASCAR Cup Series race, we also had the F1 race from Singapore. Now, there was a possibility if Max Verstappen did win this race, he would have become the champion this weekend. Unfortunately, Max Verstappen had a very adventurous race where he really struggled. This race actually got delayed an hour. Basically, they started the race an hour later and eventually ended up becoming a timed race, due to the fact that 6 cars ended up crashing out of the race. Yuki Tsunoda, I believe Guan Yu Zhou was out of the race. There was a bunch of cars that ended up getting taken out in wrecks. I believe Nicholas Latifi was another one that ended up falling out of the race. Alex Albon crashed out of the race. A ton of cars ended up crashing. But at the end of the day, Sergio Perez, who is Max Verstappen's teammate at Red Bull, he came off the corner and won the race. But they had to wait a couple hours to officially give him the win, because he got a 5-second time penalty for basically messing with the safety car, and got a 5-second time penalty because of that. That sub should have absolutely been officiated in the race. I don't understand why they waited till after the race to give it out. But he still ended up winning because he put on a really good end of performance. Sergio Perez picked up his 4th victory of the year and keeps himself, not 4th in the year, but 4th career victory, 2nd win of the year, and keeps himself in the championship hunt and has a shot to still go out there and win the Formula One championship. But he's going to have to put in some great performances and hope Max Verstappen has a complete collapse. Good to see. It was a really crazy race for sure. One of the craziest Formula One races I've ever watched. And congratulations to Sergio Perez on picking up the victory. It's good to see that he got it done. Happy for him for sure. And good to see that he was able to go out there and win the race. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're going to go ahead and talk about Petite Le Mans. Now, Saturday was the final race of the DPI era and also the 10-hour race of Petite Le Mans. And it came down to a late race restart with around 15 to 20 minutes to go, where it came down to Meyer Shank Racing versus Wayne Taylor Racing, the two accurate cars. Meyer Shank Racing had the lead, but all of a sudden, the Canoka Minolta team for Wayne Taylor Racing really started catching up to them. Unfortunately, with around 10 to 11 minutes to go in the race, Wayne Taylor Racing, they ended up, I believe, having a puncture and had major issues on the back of the car and slowed down. This gave the win to Meyer Shank Racing, and Meyer Shank Racing would not only win Motel Petite Le Mans, but they also would end up winning the final race of the DPI era and also became the 2022 IMSA DPI Championships. Congratulations to Meyer Shank Racing. Well-deserved, in my opinion. They've had an up-and-down year. They've won some races. They've lost some races this year, but they've had a great championship. And also, look at Julio Castroneves. Julio Castroneves has now won an IMSA championship in the last 2 years, the Rolex 24, an Indy 500, and now there's an SRX race, and now there's talk he could also run the Daytona 500 in 2023 as well. Pretty cool to see a Meyer Shank Racing got it done, and congratulations to them on winning Motel Petite Le Mans. Race is really good in my opinion. Congratulations to Meyer Shank Racing on getting it done. I think it's really exciting. Congratulations to them getting it done. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Sky Sports. As it was announced on Friday that Sky Sports is going to continue broadcasting F1 races in Ireland and the UK, and also technically in the United States with ESPN through the 2029 season. Really excited to see that Sky Sports is coming back. Sky Sports provided some really awesome coverage for many, many years, and they've done an absolutely fantastic job. David Croft does an amazing job doing his commentary. They bring a lot of different people and rotate from time to time. They've had Martin Brundle up there. I think Nico Rosberg's been up there from time to time. And Jetson Buttons always been up in the commentary box from time to time as well. Really excited to see Sky Sports is coming back. Yes, they can be biased from time to time, but they flag-to-flag coverage. You don't miss anything in the race. I think it's awesome to see that they are coming back. Really good to see for sure, and excited to see that Sky Sports will continue to provide F1 coverage. Really good to see for sure, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Beard Motorsports. Now, I can't remember who was reported. I think it was Dustin Albino who reported this after the crash that Justin Allgaier was involved in. But Dustin Albino reports that Linda Beard, who's the owner of Beard Motorsports, they are planning to race in the 2023 Daytona 500, but they do not have a driver announced yet. It's good to see that Beard Motorsports is going to be back for the 2023 season. There's been a lot of questions about Beard Motorsports because Mark Beard unfortunately passed away last year or earlier this year. So there's been a lot of questions if the team is going to remain past 2022. So I'm happy to see that Beard Motorsports is going to be coming back in 2023. Again, there are potential candidates they could go with. Julio Castroneves, the same could be a candidate for that ride if he doesn't end up going to the Project 91 car, if that car, of course, does enter. But there's a lot of drivers we'll have to think about who could be potential candidates to get behind the wheel of that car. But I am very happy to see that Beard Motorsports is going to be back in 2023. It's good to see a team like them is still saying, I understand that people really were concerned if they were going to be back or not. So it's a good thing for sure to see that they went ahead and basically decided, yep, we're going to come back next year and race. So good to see for sure, and very happy to see that Beard Motorsports is going to continue racing heading into 2023 and the 2023 Daytona 500. But it's unclear who will drive, but good to see that they are going to go ahead and enter the 2023 Daytona 500. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Jordan Anderson. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Camp World Truck Series race, you saw a very, very scary crash going into turn number 2. Jordan Anderson's truck basically caught up on fire and basically blew up. I think the engine blew up, and the truck ended up catching on fire. Jordan Anderson was trying to get out of the trucks. I think that the fire was inside the truck, if I'm not mistaken. He tries to get out of the truck, and unfortunately, the truck goes so far to the left with no brakes on the truck that he hits the inside wall. Jordan Anderson was airlifted to the hospital and very luckily was able to recover. Well, not recover fully, but he was able to basically he had basically some burns and has been released from the hospital. Really happy to see Jordan Anderson released from the hospital. It was a very, very scary and a very, very serious situation. So that was a really bad wreck. That was one of the worst wrecks I've seen this year for sure. And he almost got crushed too trying to jump out. But when you have a fire, you really instincts are thinking, I'm basically going to get out of that truck. So I don't not blame him for trying to get out of that truck to not get injured. Well, they get injured because he got burns. But luckily, there was no other damage like leg injuries because we all thought, because he was laying on the ground, we all thought it was way worse than it was. So it was still really, really bad. But good to see Jordan Anderson. At least he released a statement saying thank everyone for the prayers. Hope he'll be recovered and be able to get back to racing. It's a shame what happened. Good Morning America just had a really bad report on it on Sunday morning as well. Noah Lewis kind of noted that. But it is good to see that Jordan Anderson at least was released in the hospital, and wishing him for a really good and speedy recovery so he can be back at the track to race in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about William Byron and Denny Hamlin. Now, both of the drivers are speaking to media in regards to the Texas incident, and William Byron and Denny Hamlin basically talked that they had a really good conversation about what happened at Texas Motor Speedway. For those of you who are unaware of what happened at Texas Motor Speedway, coming to the beginning, I believe, the beginning of stage number 3, where I think around 60 or 70 laps to go, basically, Denny Hamlin forced William Byron a little bit wide, and William Byron got into the outside wall. Now, Denny Hamlin basically did not intentionally cause it, but William Byron got into the outside wall and kind of tried to force Hamlin below. Then under caution, as they were coming to caution, because Mark Truex Jr.'s tire ended up going down, William Byron was really mad and basically ran into the back of Denny Hamlin and spun Denny Hamlin out under the caution flag. Now, William Byron did receive a 25-point penalty after the race. I don't know why they didn't penalize him during the race, but William Byron, Denny Hamlin basically feels like he also kind of is a justified penalty because Denny Hamlin never was able to recover from that penalty as well and was frustrated. NASCAR did not see it, but he's happy that he did get a penalty. Look, I don't think William Byron and Denny Hamlin really had problems before. I think Denny respects William Byron. I think he does too. It's just a shame what happened at Texas because that was just a really, really bad situation. That could have been much worse than it ended up being. But it's good that they did end up handing him out penalties because I think it was a justified penalty, in my opinion, that William Byron received. Of course, there is an appeal that is coming this week. I can't remember exactly which day it will be. It'll probably be Tuesday or Wednesday because it is a show roll weekend. And if William Byron does end up winning the appeal, which I don't think he's going to end up winning the appeal, maybe they can get it rescinded a little bit and drop some of the points back. If he does get it rescinded a little bit, he could be a little bit closer to that cutoff line, which could end up being the case. But it's good to see, at least on one side, to see that both drivers are at least in good hands. There's no really major issues that are expected from what happened. But you did have to, I think it was justified he got a penalty. But again, I think 25 is really excessive because he could have only lost a few more points, maybe like 20 points or 15. I think would have been a fair call because NASCAR, they should have caught it in the race. I agree with the country on that one. But it is what it is, and we'll hear about the appeals later this week and see what NASCAR decides to hand to William Byron. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Matt DiBenedetto, Ben Rhodes, and Brett Holmes. Now, I already talked about this a little bit on the channel. If you watch the NASCAR Campbell Truck Series race, you witnessed a very controversial finish. On the last lap of the race, with around 200 or 300 feet to go, NASCAR decides to throw the caution flag. And as they came across the line, Brett Holmes actually crossed the finish line first. Unfortunately, NASCAR decided to throw the caution 200 feet before the finish line, and it came down to if it was going to be Ben Rhodes, Brett Holmes, or Matt DiBenedetto if they were going to win. Well, Matt DiBenedetto, because they believe he got forced below the yellow line, Matt DiBenedetto ended up going ahead and winning the race. So Matt DiBenedetto picks up his first top-tier series victory. Ben Rhodes disagreed, and Rich Lucius also disagreed as well, and Ben Rhodes feels like that he was the driver who should have been able to win the race and not the Matt DiBenedetto. And I will say this to Ben Rhodes, and Ben Rhodes should be thanking his lucky stars right now that basically he did not get a major penalty because he literally forced Matt DiBenedetto below the outline and ended up being a major cause for the wreck on the last lap of that race. If he does that, I don't think that big wreck ends up happening at the end of the day. So I don't understand what Ben Rhodes is trying to say here. And Ben Rhodes should be lucky that he ended up finishing, I think, second in the race. So Ben Rhodes should be thanking his lucky stars that he ended up having a really good points today and should be thinking the bigger picture. He's lucky that he didn't get penalized for forcing a driver below the yellow line. I don't understand why he's mad that he didn't, because he didn't get a penalty. That's the thing. He could have easily gotten a penalty, and NASCAR did not penalize him, which he should have been penalized for forcing a driver below the yellow line. I just don't understand why he is mad at NASCAR because he got lucky. He didn't get penalized from NASCAR other than basically not winning the race. He didn't get penalized. So I don't understand why Ben Rhodes is unjustifiably upset. I think he's unjustifiably has no reason to be upset about it. I think they absolutely made the right call, in my honest opinion. And I think it's a good call. I think the fact that basically NASCAR didn't give him a penalty for something else, I think he got extremely lucky and he should have been penalized, but it is what it is. But congratulations still to Matt DiBenedetto on picking up the victory in that race. First win for him, big win for him. I feel bad for Brett Holmes. Brett Holmes probably should have won if they kept it green. They should never throw in the caution, but in that situation, it is what it is. Congratulations to Matt DiBenedetto, and Ben Rhodes has no reason to be mad, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're going to talk about Brad Keselowski and Ty Gibbs. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at Texas Motor Speedway, you saw Ty Gibbs pull off a really stupid move where he got pushed wide by Ty Dillon, and then Ty Gibbs decided to run into Ty Dillon, and Ty Dillon nearly ran into Brad Keselowski's team's crew members. Now, it was Chris Buescher's, the 17 team's crew members, but that, of course, is owned by Brad Keselowski. Brad Keselowski gave his opinion on the situation and basically says that what Ty Gibbs did cannot happen once again, and he should absolutely know better. Regardless of age, you should absolutely know better. Now, Ty Gibbs did say that he listened a lot more in the meetings this past week, and he did say that he basically said it's not his words, his actions matter a lot more. Now, Ty Gibbs, he's absolutely right. Ty Gibbs absolutely needs to know better, and Brad Keselowski's also right in this situation. What Ty Gibbs did on pit road was completely unacceptable. And Brad Keselowski said it best. If they move a few more feet closer to the pit crew members and they clip a pit crew member, not only could you injure a pit crew member, but you also could, in all seriousness, cause a pit crew member to unfortunately die from your stupidity, and you could have killed a pit crew member because of your stupidity. Ty Gibbs absolutely has to know better. Who cares about age? Ty Gibbs is in the Cup Series, and you're in the Premier Series, and if you're in a Cup car, regardless of your experience behind the wheel, you should know better. It's something that you absolutely should know better and to not make those kinds of mistakes. Even I've seen drivers at Ty Gibbs' age, like Chase Elliott, never pull that kind of stupidity. And then under caution, Ty Gibbs ran the back of Eric Jones in the race. Ty Gibbs is going to have to learn a lot about restraint, and is going to have to learn a lot more about being a more respectful driver. I think Ty Gibbs is a really talented driver. Even Brad Keselowski, I think, said it best. Ty Gibbs is a really talented driver. But he's going to have to learn not to make those dumb and stupid mistakes that he made. And unfortunately, he nearly killed basically pit crew members. I just think it was such a stupid bonehead move on Ty Gibbs' part. And I'm glad that Ty Gibbs feels that his actions need to be better. I think Ty Gibbs had a much more clean race this past weekend, I will say that, and kind of showed his talent this week. So hoping he learns better, and he needs to know, because he needs to know better than what he did. And it was unacceptable, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're going to talk about Garage 56. Now, multiple reports came out in regards during Petite Le Mans. Multiple reports started coming out about Garage 56 and the expected driver lineup for the race. The three drivers that are expected to drive the car are Jeff Gordon, Mike Rockenfeller, and Jimmy Johnson. Now, Jeff Gordon isn't really a major surprise. Jeff Gordon, of course, a co-owner of Hendrick Racing, becoming the second in command at Hendrick Motorsports. He also raced in the Porsche Carrera Cup race recently at the Indianapolis Road Course about a month ago. So he has had some racing experience as of recently. Mike Rockenfeller will be racing this weekend at the Charlotte Roval in the NASCAR Cup Series, and he has a lot of experience and has run a lot of GTLM races and has won Le Mans 24 in the past in the prototype category. And then you think about Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson wants to run Le Mans 24 hours. So this core number of drivers, the three drivers they have, this is the most made sense lineup. You've got three drivers, I think, that are really, really strong. I think Jimmy Johnson, with them not having to run a full season and focusing on these major events, I think he'll do extremely well. Mike Rockenfeller, I think, is going to be the best of these three just because Mike Rockenfeller has a lot more experience in this class. No disrespect to Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson, but I think Mike Rockenfeller's experience is really going to play a factor in helping him out, have some really, really good runs in that, and get the car to the finish. And, of course, we already know this car is trying to become the first NASCAR stock car to finish a race. There's been times where NASCAR Cup Series cars have attempted the race, but this is the first time in nearly 50 years that we've seen a NASCAR Cup Series car try to make it there. Now, of course, this next-gen car has basically been modified to basically be more like a GT car, so it's not a full NASCAR Cup Series car. It's a little bit different. That being said, though, it's cool to see that these are going to be the drivers more than likely. We haven't had official word if this is going to be the team, but this is expected to be the team. When you have Jenna Fryer reporting it, pretty credible reporter, and multiple other people that I've seen report it, I trust those reporters. I think that's going to be a really strong lineup heading into 2023 for the race, and we'll see if those are the drivers, but they are expected to be the drivers that are going to drive behind the wheel of the Project Garage 56 entry. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the NASCAR Youth Series. Now, remember when I talked about this past week that Austin Kanensky reported about a new series that's expected to come? Well, it was announced yesterday morning before the NASCAR Cup Series race, about 2 hours before the NASCAR Cup Series race, that the USAC 25 Series, a quarter midget series, will be rebranded as NASCAR Youth Series. It will be a 9-race series that's going to take place at pretty much every NASCAR Cup Series track, but there will be, of course, some of these races will take place at some of the dirt tracks. The season will kick off at Auto Club Speedway, then will take place at Richmond, then the race at Worldwide Technology Raceway, then the race on the Indianapolis dirt track, that quarter mile track that's inside the racetrack, then the race at the Pocono dirt track, then the race at Watkins Glen, then Darlington, Talladega, and then finally they'll race at Charlotte on the basically the track, the quarter mile track that is on the race track. This is such a really cool series that is being brought into NASCAR. I think it's great for the sport that they are doing this. They basically get the upcoming youth that's in the series branded in there. These are young kids that will have an opportunity to really showcase their talent. I don't know if they're going to televise the series or not on TV. I'm not really sure. But this is going to be an opportunity for these kids to show what kind of talent they have, because these are young kids that are getting behind the wheel of these cars. They're going to get an opportunity to really showcase the kind of talent that they do end up having. I think this is really awesome and really exciting for the sport. I'm not sure if they will televise it or not, but it's good to see that there is a new series that is coming to NASCAR. I think it's really exciting and really cool for sure, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Alex Bowman. Now, Rick Hendrick was speaking to Bob Pockrass in regards to Alex Bowman's condition. Rick Hendrick says that Alex Bowman is feeling pretty good and hopes he is cleared to race this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. He said he's hoping, because he basically gave an update to basically during the media this week, and basically said that on Friday that Alex Bowman was starting to feel a lot better, and he's hoping to race this upcoming week at the Charlotte Roval. Alex Bowman, of course, sat out for the first time in his career in a long time due to having concussion-like symptoms, due to being involved in a really scary accident. Well, not a scary one, but a really kind of just an unfortunate accident at Texas Motor Speedway, where he hit the back of the car, and Alex Bowman basically sat out this past week, and Noah Gragson substituted in the number 48 car. I don't know if he will be cleared to race, to be honest, just because of this situation where he hit the rear of the car, because he said that's the hardest hit he felt in his career, and he's like, I don't know how I'm still out on the racetrack. I feel like that I destroyed the car. Then I believe it was his crew chief, Greg Ives, or his spotter, Kevin Hamlin, who basically said that you just hit the worst spot on the car. And he said, like I said, that's the worst hit of his career, and he's been involved in a lot of sprint car accidents in the past, so that's kind of crazy that he feels like that was the hardest hit of his life. But of course, he sat out. Now, I'll be honest with you, he could be back this week. There's a possibility that Alex Bowman could make a return this weekend at the Charlotte Roval, because it isn't a really high-speed track. It is a road course. But also with concussion-like symptoms, you could feel good one day, the next week you might feel bad. I hope that he does return this weekend. I really do. Do I think Alex Bowman has a better chance of coming back this week? I think there is a better opportunity that he does come back this week, just because he's a little bit younger than Kurt Busch. Because when you think about Kurt Busch is 44 years old. Now, in regards to Kurt Busch, he's hoping that he will actually be back later this week. He's hoping he can make a return later in the year, maybe in the last couple of races. But he, of course, would drive the 23 car, since Bubba Wallace is going to drive the 45 for the remainder of the season. But when I think about this, I think Alex Bowman, he might sit out the rest of the year. This might be it for him, and it'd be unfortunate if it is it for him. But I do think there's a better chance he will return more than Kurt Busch. Hopefully both Kurt Busch and Alex Bowman can make returns in the not-so-distant future. Hopefully they do end up making returns, and we'll see them back at the racetrack, because I'm hoping that we get to see both these drivers back at the racetrack. And my prayers still go out to Alex Bowman. Alex had a really good sense of humor to Noah Gragson this week, telling him, please don't throw up and vomit in the car. It's just a really, really funny and really good advice, and good to see that Alex still had a sense of humor considering the situation. Wishing the best for Alex Bowman, wishing for a speedy recovery, and same with Kurt Busch. Both those drivers will be able to make a return in the not-so-distant future behind the wheel of a race car in the not-so-distant future. Hopefully that both of them can be back before the end of the season, but I'm not sure if they're going to be. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Hill. Now, Austin Hill currently is not signed with Rhodes Racing right now for 2023, but he spoke to the media this past Friday, and he says that he'd love to stay with Rhodes Racing in 2023, and things are looking better to make it happen for Austin Hill to continue driving for Rhodes Racing next season. Austin Hill has won 2 races so far in the 2022 season, one at Daytona opener and one at Atlanta earlier this summer. Austin Hill has been a really surprising candidate this year. Has been one driver I've been really shocked to see this year run as well as he has been. Austin Hill has been really consistent. The last 2 weeks he's been really good and was on the verge of winning at Talladega this past weekend, but unfortunately made a late block on Noah Gragson that cost him a shot to win, ended up finishing, I think, 15th in the race after dominating. He has been the best generally on super speedways this year. He's led a lot of laps in super speedways and has been up front in pretty much every single super speedway race this year. It's a shame he only got 2 of those wins because he probably should have won all 5 of them or 6 of them that we had this year. Let's be honest on that. But Austin Hill's been really good this year and has also been extremely consistent. What's kind of nuts and crazy is the fact that I expected Austin Hill to form like Sheldon Creed has this year, and I thought that Sheldon Creed was going to form like Austin Hill. And they've been complete opposites this year, which is a really big shock to me considering both drivers, of course, came from the Campbell Truck Series. They weren't even teammates. They weren't even part of the same manufacturer. Yet both drivers have really gelled together this year and have put together a really strong performances this season. They both done solid. Yes, Sheldon Creed did not make the playoffs this year, but Sheldon Creed in the second half of this year especially, he has really come alive. And I do think 2023 for Sheldon Creed, very similar to his Campbell Truck Series days. I think Sheldon Creed is absolutely going to be a major threat next year to be a championship threat. I thought it was going to be this year he was going to be a championship threat and was going to get a few wins. And there were a couple times this year where Sheldon Creed looked like a winner this year, but unfortunately just did not close out those deals to get it done. But I think next year going into 2023, I really do believe that Sheldon Creed is absolutely going to be a threat. As for Austin Hill going into 2023, yeah, I think he's going to stay with Rich Schultz Racing because I think they look at his performance. He's been really good. He and Andy Street have really gelled really well together in that 21 camp, and maybe, just maybe, they're going to keep him because they maybe thinking about moving him up to Cup in 2024. Because I think he'd more than likely over Sheldon Creed is going to move up to Cup in 2024, Richard Schultz Racing. I think he'll maybe make a select start with a team like Spire Motorsports next year or a team that's associated with the Richard Schultz Racing brand. But I think Austin Hill is going to come back. And going into next year for 2023, I think Austin Hill is going to have a very similar year to this year, which is a really good year. I think he'll be a championship threat, get 3 or 4 wins in 2023. And I expect that Rich Schultz Racing going into 2023 as well. I really expect that team is only going to get better. So excited to see what the future for Austin Hill. And I think he'll be back with the team next year. I think that announcement will be coming in the not-so-distant future. And Austin Hill, he expects to be back with the team next year. Excited to see for sure. And hopefully he'll be back in the 21 car next year with Richard Schultz Racing. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Kaulig Racing. Now, Dalton Hopkins, who works for Front Stretch, was speaking to Chris Rice after they won the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Talladega Super Speedway. And he was speaking to him on behalf of what their team is going to look like heading into 2023. And they, of course, do have a big announcement that's coming later this Wednesday during the Kaulig Fan Day. They're expected to basically talk about it today, and they will come together and talk about what their plans are going to be for 2023. And they're expected to announce their Cup lineup heading into 2023 on October 5th. Now, there's been a lot of conversations that AJ Allmendinger could potentially go to Cup next year, and AJ has publicly said that if Matt Call wants him to go to Cup next year full-time, he would absolutely do it. Talk about AJ, I would love for AJ to go full-time in that 16 car. I don't think AJ would be like the best out there, but I think AJ would be an outside championship threat because you look at how good he is on road courses, especially this year in the Cup Series. He's been really fast at road courses. He nearly won a COTA earlier this year, had a shot to go out there and win there. Has been up front in a lot of other races this year, especially a couple other races that I think it ran really well at Texas, ran really well at Kansas, I think. They've had some really strong performances in Bristol as well. They ran really good there. I think Kaulig's a team that's going to get better next year. I know the Xfinity, they haven't been as good this year, but I think AJ, especially with 4 wins in Xfinity, how good he's been on road courses in Cup, I think that AJ has a really good chance to go to Cup. There also is a good chance that Justin Haley's going to get back in that 31 next year. Justin Haley's been really good with Kaulig, has been very solid with Kaulig this year, very surprising underdog this year, and someone I feel like that's been under the radar this year in the Cup Series. Hasn't been the best, but he hasn't been the worst either, and has just had a very solid year for an organization for their first season. But the last thing that Dalton Hopkins asked is about Chandler Smith. And basically, he said if Chandler Smith's been rumored, the future for him is in question. And Chris Rice says he actually had conversations with Chandler Smith for the first time. And Chris Rice said that if Chandler Smith wants to drive for Kaulig Racing, call him. This would be a huge pickup for Kaulig Racing if they do pick up Chandler Smith heading into 2023. And I'm going to explain why. Chandler Smith is an extremely talented driver. Chandler has scored 2 wins so far in the Camping World Truck Series for Kyle Busch Motorsports. But of course, Kyle Busch Motorsports, they're going to be switching from a Toyota team heading into 2023 to a Chevy team because of the fact that Kyle Busch is going to Richard Childress Racing next year. Chandler Smith also is not currently aligned with a manufacturer heading into 2023. And Kaulig Racing is probably going to need a third driver to drive there. Could they have Ty Dillon drive for the team next year? Sure, that's a big possibility. But I think if you're going to want to get the best performance out of a driver at a team, I think Chandler Smith is going to be that guy that you're really going to need. Chandler Smith is a very talented driver. He's won a lot in the Truck Series and has made a couple Xfinity Series starts, albeit they haven't been the best starts he's had in Xfinity. But I think Chandler Smith is a really good enough driver to where I feel like he really could do good at Kaulig. And let's be honest, they kind of need some new fresh blood at that team. Kaulig this year, I feel like in 2022, they've really struggled in Xfinity. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that their Cup Series program has been a bigger focus this year. And the fact they've got 3 cars in Xfinity, I think they should have been a 2-car team this year in Xfinity just so they could focus on that Cup program more. And I feel like their team would have been better. But then if we look at Chandler Smith and if he's going to go there, who would he replace? Easily, Landon Castle. Landon Castle has no sponsorship and funding from Voyager. Voyager, of course, basically claimed bankruptcy. He's going to be there through this year, but I don't think that he's going to be back in 2023 with Kaulig. I think Chandler Smith would be a really good candidate to drive for Kaulig Racing. I think he would for sure get the best out of that equipment for sure. So I think Chandler Smith, he needs to be looked at as someone to watch for that ride. I think there's a good chance he could go to Kaulig's Xfinity Series program and be part of the Chevy program and maybe long-term go Cup racing with Kaulig and could be a candidate there. Could be a candidate for a third car. Who knows at this point? But I think Chandler Smith would be a great candidate. Now, obviously, Toyota's going to want to keep Chandler Smith. They're really going to want to keep him. I think they want to keep him in the program. But Chandler Smith, unlike John Hunter Nemechek and Corey Heim, he's not currently aligned with a manufacturer at this moment. So I think it'd be cool for sure if they did get him to run with Kaulig. But we're going to have to see what happens. But it does sound like there is a potential really good opportunity that we could see Chandler Swift driving for the team. But we'll have to see if that happens. Kaulig will be announcing their plans here in 2 days from today. Now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about NASCAR drivers speaking out on the next-gen car safety. This past weekend at Talladega, there was a lot more discourse and a lot more drivers that seemed a lot more angry with the situation with the next-gen safety. This all comes off of the fact that Alex Bowman unfortunately missed this past weekend's Cup Series race due to missing out at Talladega. And multiple drivers already this past weekend, Denny, Hamlin, and Kevin Harvick already spoke their opinions on social media. But more drivers this past weekend, owners, spoke out. So starts off on Friday, Justin Marks, there's a tweet from Adam Stern. Justin Marks says that the best thing to do is create an Evolution Next Gen 2.0, build and update kit. Then we get to Saturday morning, where there are a lot of drivers started speaking their minds. First, Chase Elliott says, we have gone backwards in safety, crucial to make the right decisions. It says, too many years in technology for NASCAR to go backwards. It is completely unacceptable that we've gone backwards in the technology. We'll talk about the crash test here in a second. Then we get to Kyle Larson's comments. Steven Tranter did a really good report on this. And Kyle Larson says that he feels safer in a sprint car than he feels in a NASCAR Cup Series car. And he says it feels odd for him to feel safer in a NASCAR Cup Series car. Basically feel safer in a sprint car than a NASCAR Cup Series car. And that should not happen. Then Denny Hamlin was really one of the more outspoken ones in regards to this. We'll get in a second. Daniel Suarez basically said that everyone thinks we're just bitching, and we're not. It's not a good thing for the sport. He says that things have to be updated. He thinks NASCAR will fix those issues. Chase Briscoe said that I think we'll fix it, but he says it's really, really concerning. Joey Logano spoke his mind on. He feels like that the hits here at Talladega are going to be better than some of the other hits, but he also is a little concerned as well and criticized Super Speedway Racing as well. Denny Hamlin, though, was absolutely the most outspoken of the drivers and basically said there needs to be a redesign done of the next-gen car. What he means by that, well, he means basically that there needs to be a redesign of a lot of different things. Number one, they need to redesign for the short tracks, and number two, to fix the safety of this car. And then he also says that talks about the leadership of sports, saying bad leadership, and says what will fix it? Good leadership. Now, obviously, Denny Hamlin did kind of retract statement a little bit, saying that he really wasn't trying to criticize Steve Phelps. He's good friends with Steve Phelps and feels like Steve Phelps is actually good for the sport. He just feels like that some of the other leadership, I would say Steve O'Donnell's a big factor into that, needs to be changed. And then Ross Chastain gave a little bit of a different approach this past weekend, and he says that Denny does not speak for all of the drivers in regards to safety, and I kind of disagree with Ross on this one. I like Ross Chastain a lot, but we got to care about the safety a little bit, and I think Denny Hamlin speaking out on the situation basically said that Denny Hamlin is not a mouthpiece for the sport. But I disagree with Ross Chastain on that one. I think that Denny Hamlin is, because he's one of the older drivers, more veteran drivers of the sport, he probably feels like he needs to be speaking out. I don't blame Denny Hamlin and Kevin Harvick for speaking out. Now, one thing I'll talk about here is that there actually is a crash test that is planned to take place at an Ohio facility. I can't remember which Ohio facility it's going to be, but it's going to be an Ohio crash test facility where they're going to test the new parts of the cars. Now, why were the drivers this past weekend speaking out on the next-gen safety? Well, obviously, we've talked about this on the channel a lot this year, but because we've been talking about it really since, I think, July with the Kurt Busch issue at Pocono. But the next-gen car is not as safe as the previous generations of cars. We have, and sure, in other previous generations of cars, you have had more concussion. We've had concussion-like symptoms and concussions for wrecks. But there's only three or four major incidents that happened that took drivers out. We have already seen major issues with this next-gen car in the safety of this car. Kurt Busch, currently sitting out right now due to concussion-like symptoms. Basically, Alex Bowman sitting out due to concussion-like symptoms, hitting in nearly the same position that Kurt Busch basically hit. Cody Ware has a very massive and a very scary accident and basically crashed into the outside wall first really hard and hits the inside. He had crutches this past week. He did race this weekend, but probably not as hard due to the fact that he was kind of coming off of having a little bit of an injury. Hopefully, he'll be off those crutches really, really soon. And drivers this year have been complaining more and more about the hits. Basically, Mark Truex Jr. said that was one of the hardest hits he's had and was really mad at Texas, basically saying that there's a lot of things that need to change and have to change really, really quickly. Kurt Sabella's complained about the hits this year. Bubba Wallace has talked about how the rear of the car is worse. And what's the problem? Well, the rear of the car is not absorbing the energy. It is not dissipating the energy of the car, and they need to find a way to get crush zones, because one of the biggest issues with this next-gen car is the fact that this car, in the rear of the car, does not have crush zones near the back, and the drivers are absorbing the energy. And if you look where the driver is going, they're moving their head back and forth a lot more than previous generations of cars. And again, they're taking more of the energy, so they're feeling a lot more of the hits than previous. We can't have driver safety be sacrificed for better racing. That's the thing. Do I think the next-gen car has provided good racing? Yes, and I think this past weekend at Talladega, we had a pretty safe race. I think a lot of it is due to the fact that I think, one, they couldn't go 3 wide, but I also think drivers were being a little more on the cautious side of things. But it still provided a really good race because drivers were being really, really aggressive for sure, but they were being very smart and weren't making stupid moves out there, and I feel like we had a really good race this past weekend. So that's good to see. We had a really safe race considering the last few weeks. I just think when it comes to the safety of this car, there are things that absolutely need to change. And I understand the driver's frustration. When you have a younger drivers, even including Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson, who are still considered younger drivers. Yes, Kyle Larson is 30 years old now. Daniel Suarez, he's 30. Ross Chastain, he's 29, 30 years old. But when you have even younger drivers speaking out on the safety of this car, it's not a good thing for the sport all around. Now, obviously, having conversation and not getting penalized for this, I think that's a really, really good thing. I just think there needs to be more talking points. There has to be more drivers speaking out on this. And I feel like there are a lot more drivers that feel like they need to speak their opinions on these situations, but they're afraid to speak. It's not a bad thing to speak because, again, I think when you have a driver like Chase Elliott coming out and say something about the safety, I think that's a good thing because we need to have discourse on this situation. Now, like I said, there is a test being planned, and his test has been planned for about a month or two. And do I think NASCAR will get this problem fixed? Yes, and it's not an easy fix. Denny Hamlin said that this past weekend on NBC. He said that it's not going to be an easy fix. It's not going to be overnight fix and issue. And most fans know it's not going to be overnight fix. It's going to take time. And I trust that NASCAR will get these issues resolved. But it's not a good thing for the sport when you have drivers missing races and 2 concussions and other drivers getting injured and drivers complaining about injuries and having to have more therapy on their legs and stuff based in injuries because they're scared and extremely concerned. And it's just not a good thing for the sport. I do trust that NASCAR, though, will get these issues resolved as soon as possible, but it needs to be resolved as quickly as possible. I trust that NASCAR will get this fixed as soon as possible, and I think that we will see these issues fixed in the not-so-distant future. I trust NASCAR that they will get this issue resolved and fixed, but when you have drivers speaking out, it is very important to listen, and the drivers, I'm going to listen more to the drivers than the sanctioning body of the sport. So I trust the drivers a lot more, and I feel like that their frustration is felt by a lot of other people currently in the garage. So that is it for today's longer NASCAR and motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, notifications on to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links in the description below over that. And combo your thoughts on today's video. What are thoughts about the drivers talking about the next-gen safety, and do you agree with them or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are thoughts about Chandler Smith potentially headed to Kaulig Racing in 2023? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're going to have race picks on the channel for this upcoming weekend at the Charlotte Roval. Then on Wednesday, we should have a NASCAR news video. Thursday, I'll try to get a video out. I'm not sure what it will be, but I'll try to get a video out on Thursday. Friday, we'll have probably another special video out. And then Saturday and Sunday, we'll be doing race reviews for the Cup Series and Xfinity races at this upcoming weekend at the Charlotte Roval. And we might be doing a Formula 1 video extremely early in the mornings if Max Verstappen does clinch the championship. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.